No one in Millbrook ever imagined that dropping off children for a routine custody weekend would become the beginning of every parent's worst nightmare. This quiet suburban town, nestled in the heart of Pennsylvania, was the kind of place where neighbors knew each other's names, where children rode their bikes until sunset, and where the most serious crime was usually a stolen garden gnome or graffiti on the water tower. But on the morning of March 16, 2024, Millbrook would become the center of a kidnapping investigation that would shake the very foundation of what it means to trust the people closest to us. Before we dive into this incredible story that will challenge everything you think you know about family safety, make sure to hit that like button if you've ever worried about your children's security during custody visits. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell, because stories like this remind us why we need to stay informed about the dangers that exist even in our safest communities. The story begins with Sarah Mitchell, a 34-year-old registered nurse who had been fighting a bitter custody battle for over 2 years. Every other weekend, she would drive her 2 children, 8-year-old Emma and 6-year-old Jake, to their father's house at 1247 Maple Street. The routine had become as familiar as breathing: pack their overnight bags, double-check their medications, kiss them goodbye at exactly 6:30 p.m. on Friday, and pick them up at 9 a.m. on Sunday. It was a schedule that Sarah had grown to hate, but one that the family court had mandated after her divorce from David Mitchell was finalized. David Mitchell, 36 years old, worked as an insurance salesman and lived in the modest 2-story colonial house where he and Sarah had once planned to raise their family together. The divorce had been messy, triggered by Sarah's discovery of David's gambling addiction that had drained their savings and put their home in jeopardy. Despite his promises to change, despite the counseling sessions and the tearful apologies, Sarah knew she couldn't risk her children's future on David's inability to control his destructive habits. But David loved Emma and Jake with every fiber of his being. They were the light in his increasingly dark world, the reason he got up every morning and tried to piece his life back together. His modest house on Maple Street had been transformed into a child's paradise during his custody weekends. The basement had been converted into a playroom filled with toys, video games, and a massive television where they would have movie marathons. The backyard featured a swing set and a sandbox that David had built himself, spending countless hours ensuring every detail was perfect for his children's visits. On Friday, March 15, 2024, at exactly 6:47 p.m., Sarah pulled into the driveway of 1247 Maple Street. The evening was crisp and clear, with the first hints of spring beginning to show in the budding trees that lined the quiet residential street. Emma bounced excitedly in the back seat, clutching her favorite stuffed elephant, while Jake pressed his face against the window, looking for his father's familiar figure. "Remember what we talked about," Sarah said, turning to face her children with that mixture of love and anxiety that had become her constant companion. "How you call me if you need anything, okay? Anything at all." "We know, Mom," Emma replied with the patience of a child who had heard this speech dozens of times before. "Dad's not going to let anything happen to us." Sarah's heart clenched at her daughter's innocent confidence. If only she could share that certainty. But as she watched David emerge from the front door, his face lighting up at the sight of his children, she pushed down her worries and forced a smile. Whatever problems existed between her and David, she couldn't deny that he was a devoted father who would never intentionally harm Emma and Jake. The handoff was brief and cordial, as it always was. David helped carry the children's bags, while Emma and Jake ran ahead into the house, their excited voices echoing through the evening air. Sarah exchanged the necessary information about pickup times and emergency contacts, the same conversation they had every other Friday for the past year. "I'll have them ready by 9 on Sunday," David said, his voice carrying that familiar note of sadness that always appeared when their custody exchanges reminded him of everything he had lost. "I know you will," Sarah replied, and for a moment, the animosity between them softened into something resembling the partnership they had once shared. As Sarah drove away, she caught a glimpse of her children in the rearview mirror, already disappearing into the house where they would spend the next 2 nights. She had no way of knowing that this would be the last time she would see them as the carefree, innocent children they had always been. She had no way of knowing that someone had been watching this routine exchange, studying the family's patterns, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The house at 1247 Maple Street looked perfectly normal from the outside. The porch light cast a warm glow over the front steps, and the windows glowed with the soft light of a family settling in for a cozy evening together. But appearances can be deceiving, and sometimes the greatest dangers come from the places and people we trust the most. What happened over the next 14 hours would transform a routine custody weekend into a parent's worst nightmare, expose the dark secrets that can hide behind friendly faces, and prove that evil sometimes wears the mask of kindness. This is the story of how two innocent children became pawns in a twisted game they never knew they were playing, and how their mother's love and determination would be tested in ways she never imagined possible. But what the police would discover inside that house on Saturday morning would change everything they thought they knew about this case, and reveal a truth so disturbing that it would haunt the community of Millbrook for years to come. To understand the full horror of what happened to the Mitchell family, we need to step back and examine the lives of the people involved, because this story isn't just about a crime, it's about how ordinary people can become victims of extraordinary evil, and how the very systems designed to protect families can sometimes put them in danger. Sarah Mitchell had built her life around her children. After the divorce, she had moved into a modest two-bedroom apartment in downtown Millbrook, close enough to the hospital where she worked as a registered nurse in the pediatric ward. Her days began at 5:30 a.m. with a cup of coffee and a review of her patients' charts, followed by the careful orchestration of getting Emma and Jake ready for school. She had become a master of efficiency, packing lunches while helping with homework, braiding Emma's hair while quizzing Jake on his spelling words. The apartment was small but filled with love. The living room walls were covered with the children's artwork, school photos, and certificates from Emma's basketball team and Jake's swimming lessons. Sarah had sacrificed space for location, choosing to live in a cramped apartment rather than move to a larger place farther from the children's school and her work. Every decision she made was filtered through one question: what was best for Emma and Jake? Emma Mitchell was 8 years old and possessed the kind of fierce intelligence that both impressed and occasionally intimidated the adults in her life. She had inherited her mother's determination and her father's quick wit, creating a personality that was both endearing and formidable. At school, she was known as the girl who stood up for younger children being bullied, who always had the right answer in math class, and who could organize a playground game with the efficiency of a military general. But Emma also carried burdens that no 8-year-old should have to bear. She had become hyper-aware of her parents' emotions, constantly monitoring their faces for signs of stress or sadness. She had learned to be the perfect child during custody exchanges, never complaining or showing favoritism, because she instinctively understood that her behavior could somehow affect the delicate balance of her fractured family. Jake Mitchell, at 6 years old, was the family's ray of sunshine. Where Emma was serious and thoughtful, Jake was spontaneous and joyful. He had a laugh that could fill a room, and an imagination that turned cardboard boxes into spaceships and backyard trees into castles. He loved dinosaurs with the passion that only a 6-year-old could muster, and could recite facts about prehistoric creatures with the accuracy of a paleontologist. Unlike his sister, Jake seemed largely unaffected by the divorce. He accepted the two-house arrangement with the adaptability of childhood, treating each home as a separate adventure. He loved the playroom in his father's basement and the cozy reading nook his mother had created in their apartment. To Jake, having 2 bedrooms and 2 sets of toys wasn't a sign of a broken family. It was simply his normal. David Mitchell's life had become a careful balance of work, recovery, and the precious weekends with his children. After the divorce, he had thrown himself into rebuilding his life with the same intensity that had once driven his gambling addiction. He attended Gamblers Anonymous meetings 3 times a week, had surrendered control of his finances to a court-appointed monitor, and worked overtime to pay off the debts that had destroyed his marriage. The house on Maple Street had become both his sanctuary and his prison. Every room held memories of the family he had lost through his own poor choices. The kitchen where Sarah used to cook Sunday dinners now echoed with silence most days of the week. The master bedroom felt too large for one person, and David had taken to sleeping in the guest room to avoid the constant reminder of his solitude. But when Emma and Jake came for their visits, the house came alive again. David would spend the weeks between visits planning activities, researching new movies they might enjoy, and preparing their favorite meals. He had learned to braid Emma's hair by watching YouTube videos and had memorized every dinosaur fact that Jake shared with him. These weekends weren't just visits. They were David's lifeline to the man he wanted to be. The neighborhood of Maple Street was exactly what most people pictured when they thought of suburban America. The houses were well maintained, The lawns were carefully manicured, and the sidewalks were safe for children to ride their bikes and play hopscotch. It was the kind of place where neighbors borrowed cups of sugar, where block parties were annual traditions, and where everyone knew which house gave out the best Halloween candy. Marcus Webb lived at 1251 Maple Street, just 4 houses down from David Mitchell. To his neighbors, Marcus was the ideal resident, always willing to help with yard work, quick to shovel elderly neighbors' driveways in winter, and knowledgeable about home security systems, thanks to his job as a technical installer. He was the kind of neighbor who noticed when packages were delivered to empty houses and who kept an eye on things when families went on vacation. Marcus was 42 years old, a quiet man who had moved to Maple Street 5 years earlier after the death of his wife and daughter in a car accident. The tragedy had left him devastated, and neighbors often spoke in hushed tones about how he had never quite recovered from his loss. He worked for Secure Home Systems, a local company that installed security cameras and alarm systems, which gave him an intimate knowledge of how to protect homes and, unfortunately, how to circumvent those same protections. To the casual observer, Marcus seemed to have found a new purpose in helping his neighbors feel safe. He had installed security systems for several families on the street, often at cost or even for free, claiming that he wanted to give back to the community that had supported him through his grief. The Mitchell house had been one of his projects, completed just 6 months after David and Sarah's divorce was finalized. "I just want to make sure the kids are safe when they're here," David had explained to Sarah when he told her about the new security system. "Marcus is a good guy and he's giving me a great deal. It'll give us both peace of mind." Sarah had been grateful for the added security, especially given her concerns about David's judgment during his recovery from gambling addiction. The cameras and alarms seemed like a responsible step, evidence that David was taking his role as a father seriously. She had no way of knowing that those same security measures would become the tools of her children's kidnapping. The weeks leading up to March 15th had been particularly stressful for the Mitchell family. Sarah had been working extra shifts at the hospital to save money for a potential custody modification hearing. She wanted to petition the court for primary custody, arguing that David's gambling addiction and financial instability made him an unfit guardian. The legal fees were mounting, and every extra hour at work meant more money towards securing her children's future. David, meanwhile, had been struggling with the pressure of his recovery program and the constant fear that he might lose even his limited time with Emma and Jake. His gambling addiction had been triggered by stress, and the current situation was more stressful than anything he had faced since his divorce. He had been taking sleeping medication, prescribed by his doctor, to help with the insomnia that had plagued him since Sarah left. Emma had been having nightmares about her parents fighting, dreams where she was forced to choose between her mother and father. She had started asking difficult questions about why families break apart and whether it was somehow her fault that her parents couldn't live together anymore. Sarah had scheduled appointments with a child psychologist, but the earliest available appointment wasn't until the end of March. Jake, despite his generally sunny disposition, had been acting out at school. His teacher had called Sarah twice in the past month to report incidents where Jake had become aggressive with other children, something that was completely out of character for the normally gentle boy. The stress of the custody situation was affecting him more than anyone had realized. The basketball season had just ended for Emma's team, and she had been disappointed that they hadn't made it to the championship game. She had been looking forward to the weekend with her father, partly because he had promised to set up a basketball hoop in the backyard so she could practice for next season. It was these small promises and shared activities that made the custody arrangement bearable for all of them. On the Thursday before that fateful weekend, Sarah had called David to confirm the pickup and drop-off times, as she always did. The conversation had been brief and businesslike, but David had mentioned that he was planning to take the children to the new indoor trampoline park that had opened in the next town over. Emma and Jake had been talking about it for weeks, and David was excited to surprise them. "Just make sure they don't eat too much junk food," Sarah had said, the kind of parental reminder that had become routine in their co-parenting relationship. "I'll take good care of them," David had replied, and Sarah had heard the sincerity in his voice. Whatever his faults, she had never doubted his love for their children. That Thursday evening, as Sarah helped Emma with her math homework and listened to Jake practice reading aloud, she had felt a moment of contentment. Despite all the challenges they faced, despite the broken marriage and the financial stress and the uncertainty about the future, they were still a family, different than before, fractured in some ways, but held together by love and determination. She had no way of knowing that someone had been watching their family for months, studying their routines, learning their vulnerabilities, and planning something so horrific that it would change all of their lives forever. She had no way of knowing that the security system she trusted to protect her children would become the very tool used to take them away from her. As Friday, March 15th dawned bright and clear, Sarah Mitchell went through her normal routine of preparing for another custody weekend. She packed Emma's favorite books and Jake's stuffed dinosaur, made sure they had their allergy medications, and reminded them to call her if they needed anything. It was a routine she had performed dozens of times before, but this time would be different. This time, someone was waiting. Saturday, March 16th, 2024, began like any other morning in Millbrook. The sun rose at 6:23 a.m., casting long shadows across the quiet streets, where early joggers were beginning their weekend routines. Coffee shops were opening their doors, and the local bakery was filling with the aroma of fresh pastries. It was the kind of peaceful Saturday morning that made people grateful to live in a small town where the biggest worry was usually whether the high school football team would make it to the state championships. But at 1247 Maple Street, something was terribly wrong. Sarah Mitchell had always been an early riser, a habit formed during her nursing school days and reinforced by years of hospital shifts. On custody weekends, she typically used Saturday mornings to catch up on household chores, grocery shopping, and the 100 small tasks that accumulated during her busy work week. But this Saturday morning, she found herself unable to concentrate on anything, except the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. She had tried calling David's house at 8 a.m. just to check in and hear her children's voices. It wasn't unusual for her to call during custody weekends. Despite the court's instructions about not interfering with David's parenting time, both parents had agreed that brief check-in calls were acceptable. But the phone had rung and rung without answer, eventually going to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached David, Emma, and Jake," David's recorded voice had said cheerfully. "We can't come to the phone right now, but leave a message, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible." Sarah had left a brief message asking them to call her back, then tried to dismiss her growing anxiety. David was probably just taking the children out for breakfast, or maybe they were all still sleeping in. It was Saturday morning, after all, and David had always been more relaxed about schedules than Sarah was. But by 8:30 a.m., when there was still no return call, Sarah's maternal instincts were screaming that something was wrong. She tried David's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She tried the house phone again with the same result. The silence from 1247 Maple Street was becoming deafening. At 8:45 a.m., Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She got in her car and drove to David's house. The drive from her apartment to Maple Street normally took 12 minutes, but that Saturday morning, it felt like an eternity. Sarah's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white, and she found herself running through every possible explanation for why David wasn't answering his phone. Maybe he had forgotten to charge it. Maybe they had gone out early and left it at home. Maybe the ringer was turned off. But deep in her heart, Sarah knew that none of these explanations felt right. David was many things: irresponsible with money, addicted to gambling, sometimes unreliable, but he was never careless when it came to the children. He would never ignore her calls when Emma and Jake were in his care. When Sarah pulled into the driveway of 1247 Maple Street at 8:57 a.m., the first thing she noticed was that David's car was still in the driveway. The second thing she noticed was that all the curtains were drawn, which was unusual for a Saturday morning when David typically opened the house to let in natural light. The third thing she noticed was the absolute silence. No sounds of children playing, no television, no music, nothing. Sarah walked up to the front door and rang the doorbell. The sound echoed through the house, but there was no response. She rang it again, then began knocking loudly. "David!" she called out. "Emma, Jake, it's Mom." Still nothing. Sarah tried the front door handle and found it locked. She walked around to the back of the house, her anxiety growing with each step. The back door was also locked, and when she peered through the kitchen window, she could see that the house appeared to be empty. No breakfast dishes on the counter, no signs of the morning routine that should have been in progress. It was at this moment, standing in David's backyard at 9:03 a.m. on Saturday morning, that Sarah Mitchell realized her worst fears were coming true. Something had happened to her children. She pulled out her cell phone and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency?" the dispatcher asked in the calm, professional tone that emergency operators are trained to use. "My children are missing," Sarah said, her voice already beginning to shake. I'm at my ex-husband's house for pickup, and no one is answering the door. The house is locked and there's no sign of anyone inside. Ma'am, I need you to stay calm, the dispatcher replied. Can you tell me your location? 1247 Maple Street in Millbrook. My ex-husband, David Mitchell, was supposed to have my children here for a custody visit, but something's wrong. They're not answering the phone, they're not answering the door, and the house is completely silent. How old are your children, ma'am? 8 and 6. Emma is 8, Jake is 6. They were supposed to be here. David would never just leave with them without telling me. The dispatcher asked Sarah to remain at the location while police units were dispatched to the scene. Those next 18 minutes, waiting for the police to arrive, were the longest of Sarah's life. She walked around the house repeatedly, checking every window, calling out her children's names, and trying to find any sign of what might have happened. At 9:21 a.m., Officer Jennifer Walsh of the Millbrook Police Department arrived at 1247 Maple Street. Officer Walsh was a 10-year veteran of the force and the mother of 2 young children herself. She immediately recognized the terror in Sarah's eyes, the primal fear that every parent carries deep in their heart, the nightmare that keeps mothers and fathers awake at night. Mrs. Mitchell, Officer Walsh approached Sarah with the kind of calm authority that police officers develop over years of dealing with crisis situations. I'm Officer Walsh. Can you tell me exactly what's happening here? Sarah explained the situation as coherently as she could manage, given that her world was falling apart around her. She told Officer Walsh about the custody arrangement, about her failed attempts to contact David, about the locked house and the unnatural silence. With each detail she shared, the gravity of the situation became more apparent. Officer Walsh tried calling David's phone herself, with the same result Sarah had experienced. She then walked around the house, checking for signs of forced entry or struggle. Finding none, she made the decision to enter the house. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm going to need you to stay here while I check inside, Officer Walsh said. Do you have a key to the house? No, but David keeps a spare key under the fake rock by the front steps, Sarah replied. I helped him choose the hiding spot when we were still married. Officer Walsh retrieved the key and unlocked the front door. The moment she stepped inside 1247 Maple Street, she knew this was no ordinary missing persons case. The house was eerily quiet, but it was also clearly the scene of something disturbing. In the living room, Officer Walsh found David Mitchell unconscious on the couch, breathing but unresponsive. There were no obvious signs of injury, but he appeared to be in some kind of drugged state. On the coffee table next to him was an empty bottle of prescription sleeping medication, the same medication David had been taking for his insomnia. But it was what Officer Walsh found in the children's bedroom that made her blood run cold. The room had been carefully staged to look normal at first glance. The beds were made, the toys were neatly arranged, and there were no signs of struggle. But when Officer Walsh looked more closely, she noticed that several items were missing. Emma's overnight bag was gone, along with Jake's favorite stuffed dinosaur. Most disturbing of all, there was a note on Emma's pillow, written in block letters on plain white paper. They are safe. They are where they belong. Do not look for them. Officer Walsh immediately called for backup and requested that Detective Maria Rodriguez be notified. She then returned to the front yard where Sarah was waiting, her face a mask of barely controlled panic. Mrs. Mitchell, I need you to listen to me very carefully, Officer Walsh said. Your ex-husband is inside the house and he appears to be unconscious but alive. We're calling an ambulance for him right now, but I need to ask you some questions about your children. Where are Emma and Jake? Sarah screamed, her composure finally breaking completely. Where are my babies? We're going to find them, Officer Walsh said firmly, but I need your help. Is there anywhere David might have taken them? Any relatives or friends he might have contacted? He wouldn't just leave, Sarah sobbed. David has problems, but he would never take the children without telling me. He knows how worried I get. Something happened to them. Someone took them. As if summoned by Sarah's worst fears, Detective Maria Rodriguez arrived at the scene at 9:41 a.m. Detective Rodriguez was 38 years old, a 15-year veteran of the police force who specialized in crimes against children. She was also the mother of twin teenagers, which gave her a deep understanding of the terror that Sarah was experiencing. Detective Rodriguez took one look at the scene, the unconscious father, the missing children, the cryptic note, and immediately understood that this was not a custody dispute or a case of parental kidnapping. This was something much more sinister. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm Detective Rodriguez, she said, approaching Sarah with the kind of calm authority that comes from years of dealing with family crises. I know this is terrifying, But I need you to help me understand what happened here. Every detail you can remember might be important. Sarah tried to compose herself enough to answer the detective's questions. She explained about the custody arrangement, about David's gambling addiction and recovery, about her concerns for the children's safety. She described the normal routine of Friday evening drop-offs and Sunday morning pickups, and how nothing about this weekend had seemed different from any other. "Has David ever threatened to take the children?" Detective Rodriguez asked. "Never," Sarah replied without hesitation. "David loves Emma and Jake, but he would never do anything to hurt me like that. He knows how much they mean to me, and he would never drug himself. He's been so careful about his recovery." Detective Rodriguez was beginning to form a theory about what had happened, and it wasn't good. The unconscious father, the missing children, the note left behind. These were all signs of a carefully planned kidnapping, not a spontaneous act by a desperate parent. At 10:15 a.m., paramedics arrived and began working on David Mitchell. His vital signs were stable, but he was deeply unconscious, clearly having ingested far more sleeping medication than was safe or normal. The empty bottle on the coffee table suggested that he had taken the entire contents, nearly 20 pills that should have lasted him a month. "This wasn't suicide," the lead paramedic told Detective Rodriguez. "The amount he took would cause unconsciousness, but it's not typically fatal. It's like someone wanted him out of the way, but not dead." As David was loaded into the ambulance and rushed to Millbrook General Hospital, Detective Rodriguez began the process of treating 1247 Maple Street as a crime scene. She called for the forensics team, established a perimeter around the house, and began the methodical process of gathering evidence. But even as the investigation began in earnest, Sarah Mitchell stood in the front yard of her ex-husband's house, watching her world collapse around her. Her children were gone, taken by someone who had planned this carefully enough to drug their father and leave a note behind. The note's message was clear. Whoever had taken Emma and Jake didn't want them to be found. As news of the kidnapping began to spread through Millbrook, neighbors started gathering on Maple Street. Marcus Webb, the helpful neighbor who had installed David's security system, was among the first to arrive. He approached Detective Rodriguez with the kind of concerned helpfulness that made him such a valued member of the community. "Detective, I live just down the street," Marcus said. "I installed the security system in David's house. If there's anything I can do to help find those children, please let me know." Detective Rodriguez thanked Marcus for his offer and made a note to interview him later, along with all the other neighbors. In cases like this, every piece of information could be crucial, and neighbors often noticed things that seemed insignificant at the time but proved important later. But what Detective Rodriguez didn't know yet was that the person offering to help find Emma and Jake Mitchell was the same person who had taken them. Marcus Webb stood in that crowd of concerned neighbors, watching the investigation unfold, knowing exactly where the children were and what he planned to do with them. The search for Emma and Jake Mitchell was about to begin, but the person they were looking for was hiding in plain sight, wearing the mask of a helpful neighbor and a grieving widower. The next 72 hours would test every assumption the investigators had about trust, community, and the lengths that evil will go to achieve its twisted goals. As the sun reached its peak on that Saturday afternoon, casting harsh shadows across Maple Street, Sarah Mitchell faced the beginning of every parent's worst nightmare. Her children were gone, taken by someone who had planned this crime with meticulous care. The question wasn't just who had taken them, it was whether Emma and Jake would ever come home again. But what the investigation would uncover about the person responsible for this crime would shock everyone involved, because sometimes the greatest monsters are the ones who live right next door. The investigation into the disappearance of Emma and Jake Mitchell began with the kind of methodical precision that Detective Maria Rodriguez had developed over 15 years of working cases involving missing children. Every minute that passed reduced the chances of finding the children alive and unharmed, but Rodriguez knew that rushing the initial evidence gathering could mean missing crucial clues that might lead to their recovery. By 11:30 a.m. on Saturday, March 16th, the house at 1247 Maple Street had been transformed into a crime scene. Yellow tape cordoned off the property, forensics technicians were dusting for fingerprints, and investigators were photographing every inch of the house. The Millbrook Police Department had called in additional resources from the county sheriff's office and had contacted the FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team, knowing that time was their enemy in cases like this. Detective Rodriguez's first priority was interviewing David Mitchell, but he remained unconscious at Millbrook General Hospital. The doctors estimated that he had ingested approximately 20 Ambien tablets, far more than the prescribed dose, and it would be several hours before he was coherent enough to answer questions. Blood tests confirmed that he had been drugged, but whether he had taken the medication voluntarily or been forced to ingest it remained unclear. While waiting for David to regain consciousness, Rodriguez focused on the physical evidence at the crime scene. The house told a story, but it was a story that had been carefully edited by someone who understood how investigations worked. The security system that Marcus Webb had installed 6 months earlier had been disabled at exactly 11:47 p.m. on Friday night. The cameras had stopped recording, and the motion sensors had been turned off, creating a window of opportunity that lasted until 6:23 a.m. Saturday morning, when the system mysteriously reactivated itself. This wasn't a malfunction. Someone with intimate knowledge of the system had deliberately created a blind spot in the surveillance. Whoever did this knew exactly how this security system worked, Rodriguez told Officer Walsh as they examined the control panel. They didn't just turn it off, they programmed it to turn back on automatically, probably to avoid suspicion when the house was discovered. The forensics team found no signs of forced entry anywhere in the house. Every door and window was secure, with no scratches on the locks or damage to the frames. This meant that whoever had entered the house either had a key or had been let in by someone who trusted them. In the children's bedroom, the scene was almost too perfect. The beds were made with military precision, the toys were arranged in neat rows, and there were no signs of struggle or disturbance. But this perfection was itself suspicious. No children's bedroom ever looked that organized, especially not when those children were supposed to be spending a relaxed weekend with their father. The note found on Emma's pillow was written in block letters with a black felt tip marker on standard white copy paper. The handwriting analysis would take days, but Rodriguez could already see that the letters were carefully formed, suggesting someone who was trying to disguise their natural handwriting. The message itself was chilling in its simplicity. They are safe. They are where they belong. Do not look for them. This isn't a ransom note, Rodriguez explained to Sarah, who had been brought to the police station for her own safety and to provide a detailed statement. Kidnappers who want money make demands. This person is telling us not to look for the children, which suggests they plan to keep them permanently. Sarah's face went white at this assessment. What does that mean? What do they want with Emma and Jake? We're going to find out, Rodriguez promised, though privately she was deeply concerned about the implications of the note. In her experience, kidnappers who didn't want ransom money usually had much darker motivations. The investigation expanded to include interviews with everyone who had contact with the Mitchell family. Teachers, neighbors, co-workers, and family members were all questioned about any unusual behavior or suspicious individuals they might have noticed. The list of people who knew about the custody arrangement and the family's weekend routine was surprisingly long, but one name kept appearing in multiple interviews: Marcus Webb. "Oh yes, Marcus is wonderful," said Mrs. Henderson, who lived across the street from David. "He installed our security system too, and he never charged us full price. He's always looking out for the neighborhood children." "Marcus helped me set up my new television last month," reported Tom Bradley from 2 houses down. He mentioned that he really admired how well David was handling the custody situation with his kids, said it reminded him of his own daughter. "I've seen Marcus talking to the Mitchell children when they're playing in the yard," noted Jennifer Walsh, a neighbor who lived at the end of the block. "He always seemed very interested in their activities, asking about school and sports. I thought it was sweet that he cared so much about the neighborhood kids." Each interview painted Marcus Webb as the ideal neighbor, helpful, caring, and particularly attentive to the children in the community. But Detective Rodriguez's instincts were telling her that this level of interest in other people's children might not be as innocent as it appeared. At 2:15 p.m., Rodriguez decided to pay Marcus Webb a visit. Marcus lived at 1251 Maple Street, in a house that was identical to David's but meticulously maintained. The lawn was perfectly manicured, the flower beds were weed-free, and the exterior of the house looked like something from a home improvement magazine. When Rodriguez rang the doorbell, Marcus answered immediately, as if he had been waiting for her arrival. "Detective Rodriguez," Marcus said with a concerned expression, "I heard about what happened to David's children. This is just terrible. Is there any news?" "We're still investigating, Mr. Webb," Rodriguez replied, studying Marcus's face carefully. "I understand you installed the security system at the Mitchell house." "Yes, about 6 months ago. David was concerned about safety, especially with the children visiting on weekends. I gave him a good deal on the installation because I believe every family deserves to feel secure in their home. Rodriguez noted that Marcus seemed unusually well informed about the Mitchell family's situation. How well do you know the family? Not extremely well, but we're neighbors. I've talked to David a few times about the challenges of single parenting. I lost my own wife and daughter a few years ago, so I understand how difficult it can be to raise children alone. I'm sorry for your loss, Rodriguez said, making a mental note to research Marcus's family tragedy. When was the last time you saw David or the children? Marcus paused for just a moment too long before answering. Friday evening when Sarah dropped them off. I was working in my garden and saw them arrive. They seemed happy and excited about their weekend. Did you notice anything unusual about the house last night or this morning? No, nothing at all. I went to bed early and didn't hear anything out of the ordinary. I was shocked when I saw all the police cars this morning. Rodriguez thanked Marcus for his time and left, but something about the conversation bothered her. Marcus had been almost too helpful, too concerned, and too knowledgeable about the family's private affairs. She made a note to run a background check on Marcus Webb and to examine his relationship with the Mitchell family more closely. At 3:45 p.m., David Mitchell finally regained consciousness at the hospital. Rodriguez rushed to his bedside, hoping that he could provide crucial information about what had happened in his house the night before. David was groggy and confused, struggling to piece together the events of Friday evening. I remember making dinner for the kids, he said slowly. We had pizza and watched a movie. Then I gave them their baths and put them to bed around 9:30. What happened after that? Rodriguez asked gently. I don't remember much. I was feeling really tired, more tired than usual. I took my sleeping medication and went to bed, but I felt strange, like the room was spinning. How many pills did you take? Just one, like always. I'm very careful about that because of my addiction history. I never take more than prescribed. Rodriguez showed David the empty bottle that had been found at the scene. This bottle contained 20 pills yesterday, according to the pharmacy label. It was completely empty when we found it. David stared at the bottle in confusion. That's impossible. I only took one pill. I would never take that many. It could kill me. David, I need you to think very carefully. Is there anyone who had access to your house? Anyone who knew about your medication? David's face suddenly went pale. Marcus, he whispered. Marcus Webb? He has a key to my house. I gave it to him when he installed the security system, in case there were any problems with the equipment. And he knew about my sleeping medication, because I mentioned it when he was asking about my insomnia. Rodriguez felt a chill run down her spine. David, I need you to tell me everything you know about Marcus Webb. Over the next hour, David provided a detailed account of his relationship with Marcus. The neighbor had been incredibly helpful after the divorce, offering to install the security system at a fraction of the normal cost. He had also been unusually interested in the children, asking detailed questions about their schedules, their school activities, and their relationship with their mother. He said he missed having children around, David explained. He told me that Emma reminded him of his daughter who died. I thought he was just being kind, trying to fill a void in his life by helping with my kids. Did he ever ask about your custody arrangement specifically? All the time. He wanted to know when the kids would be visiting, how long they would stay, what activities we had planned. I thought he was just being neighborly, but now... David's voice trailed off as the implications of Marcus's behavior became clear. The helpful neighbor who had installed their security system, who had a key to their house, who knew about David's medication, and who was obsessively interested in the children, had been in the perfect position to plan and execute their kidnapping. Rodriguez immediately called for backup and requested a search warrant for Marcus Webb's house. But when officers arrived at 1251 Maple Street at 6:30 p.m., they found the house empty. Marcus's car was gone, and there were no signs of recent occupancy. A search of the house revealed the true scope of Marcus's obsession with the Mitchell family. In the basement, investigators found a makeshift shrine dedicated to his deceased daughter, Lily Webb, who had died at age 7 in a car accident 5 years earlier. But surrounding Lily's photos were dozens of pictures of Emma and Jake Mitchell, taken secretly over a period of months. The photos showed the children playing in their father's backyard, walking to school, and participating in various activities around town. Marcus had been stalking them systematically, documenting their routines and behaviors with the dedication of a professional surveillance operative. But the most disturbing discovery was Marcus's journal, found hidden in a locked drawer in his bedroom. The entries revealed a man who had become completely detached from reality, convinced that he was saving children from broken homes and giving them the stable family life that his own daughter had been denied. March 1st. Emma played basketball in the driveway today. She has Lily's determination and grace. She deserves better than being shuttled between two homes like a piece of luggage. March 8th. Jake was crying when Sarah dropped them off. The divorce is hurting these children just like it hurt Lily. Someone needs to protect them from their selfish parents. March 12th. David mentioned that Sarah is trying to get full custody. She wants to take the children away from their father completely. These children need stability, not more legal battles. They need a real family. The final entry was dated March 15th, the day of the kidnapping. Tonight I will save Emma and Jake from their broken family. I have found them a new home with people who will love them properly. The Hartwells in Oregon are expecting their new children on Monday. By the time anyone realizes what happened, Emma and Jake will be safe with their real family. Rodriguez felt her blood run cold as she read this entry. Marcus hadn't just kidnapped the children, he had arranged to sell them to another family through what appeared to be an illegal adoption network. The children were already in transit to Oregon, and time was running out to save them. The investigation immediately expanded to include federal authorities, as the case now involved interstate trafficking of minors. The FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team took over coordination of the search, while local authorities continued to gather evidence about Marcus's network of contacts. Computer forensics revealed that Marcus had been communicating with an underground adoption ring that specialized in placing children with families who couldn't qualify for legal adoption. The Hartwell family in Portland, Oregon, had paid $50,000 for what they believed were orphaned siblings whose parents had died in a car accident. They think they're saving these children, FBI agent Sarah Chen explained to Rodriguez. The adoption ring tells prospective parents that they're rescuing kids from abusive situations or from overwhelmed foster care systems. The families have no idea they're participating in kidnapping. The race was now on to intercept Marcus and the children before they reached Oregon. Highway patrol units across 3 states were alerted, airports and bus stations were monitored, and every law enforcement agency between Pennsylvania and Oregon was provided with photos of Marcus, Emma, and Jake. But Marcus had planned this operation carefully. He wasn't using his own vehicle or traveling under his real name. The security system expertise that had made him such a valuable neighbor had also taught him how to avoid surveillance cameras and electronic tracking. At 8:45 p.m. on Saturday, nearly 12 hours after the children had been discovered missing, investigators got their first real break in the case. A gas station attendant in western Pennsylvania reported seeing a man matching Marcus's description, purchasing snacks and drinks that appeared to be intended for children. The man had paid cash and seemed nervous, constantly checking his watch and looking around the store. Security footage from the gas station confirmed that it was Marcus Webb, but he was driving a different vehicle, a white panel van with no windows in the back. The license plate was registered to a fictitious address, but the van itself had been purchased with cash from a used car dealer 3 weeks earlier. He's been planning this for at least a month, Agent Chen told the assembled task force. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was a carefully orchestrated operation. The gas station sighting gave investigators a direction and a timeline. Marcus was heading west on Interstate 80, probably planning to drive straight through to Oregon to avoid the risk of staying in hotels where he might be recognized. If he maintained highway speeds and stopped only for gas, he could reach Portland in approximately 30 hours. But the children had now been missing for over 12 hours, and every minute that passed reduced the chances of intercepting them before they reached their destination. Sarah Mitchell, who had been waiting at the police station for news, was informed about the developments in the case. "They're taking my babies to Oregon?" she asked, her voice breaking with despair. "How is this possible? How could someone just steal children and sell them like property?" "We're going to find them," Rodriguez promised, though privately she knew that the odds were becoming increasingly difficult. Marcus had a significant head start, and the vast network of highways between Pennsylvania and Oregon provided countless opportunities for him to change routes or hide. As night fell on Saturday, March 16th, the search for Emma and Jake Mitchell had become a race against time across multiple states. Somewhere on the highways of America, 2 innocent children were being transported toward a fate they couldn't understand, by a man who believed he was saving them from their loving family. The investigation had revealed the shocking truth about Marcus Webb. The helpful neighbor was actually a predator who had been stalking the Mitchell family for months, planning to steal their children and sell them to unsuspecting buyers. But knowing who had taken Emma and Jake was only the first step in bringing them home safely. The next 24 hours would determine whether this story would end in reunion or tragedy, and whether the love of a desperate mother would be enough to overcome the carefully laid plans of a madman who believed he was doing God's work by destroying families in the name of saving children. But what investigators didn't know yet was that Marcus Webb's crimes went far deeper than just the Mitchell family, and that Emma and Jake weren't his first victims. The discovery of his true history would reveal a pattern of child trafficking that had been operating under their noses for years, hidden behind the facade of a grieving widower who just wanted to help his neighbors feel safe. As Sunday morning dawned across the American heartland, the search for Emma and Jake Mitchell had evolved into one of the largest multi-state manhunts in recent memory. FBI agents, state police, and local law enforcement agencies across 6 states were coordinating their efforts to intercept Marcus Webb before he could deliver the children to their unwitting buyers in Oregon. But what investigators were about to discover would transform this case from a single kidnapping into something far more sinister and far-reaching. At 6:30 a.m. on Sunday, March 17th, FBI agent Sarah Chen received a call that would change the entire trajectory of the investigation. Detective Linda Morrison from the Columbus, Ohio Police Department had been following the news coverage of the Mitchell kidnapping and recognized disturbing similarities to a case she had worked 3 years earlier. Agent Chen, I think your suspect Marcus Webb might be connected to an unsolved disappearance we had here in 2021, Detective Morrison explained during their phone conversation. A 6-year-old boy named Tommy Chen vanished from his father's apartment during a custody visit. The circumstances were almost identical to what you're describing. Agent Chen felt her pulse quicken. Tell me everything. Tommy's parents were divorced, and he was spending the weekend with his father when he disappeared. The father was found unconscious from an apparent drug overdose, but he swore he had only taken his prescribed medication. There was no sign of forced entry, and we found a note that said the child was safe and where he belonged. The case went cold after 6 months. The parallels were too striking to be coincidental. Agent Chen immediately requested all files related to the Tommy Chen case and dispatched a team of investigators to Columbus to examine the evidence. What they discovered would reveal that Marcus Webb's crimes stretched back much further than anyone had imagined. Tommy Chen's father, Michael, had been struggling with depression following his divorce and had been prescribed sleeping medication by his doctor. On the night Tommy disappeared, Michael had taken what he thought was his normal dose, but blood tests revealed levels consistent with a massive overdose. Like David Mitchell, Michael insisted he had only taken 1 pill. The most chilling similarity was in the details of the crime scene. Tommy's bedroom had been meticulously cleaned and organized, with his belongings carefully arranged as if for display. The note left behind used identical phrasing to the one found in Emma's room, and handwriting analysis would later confirm they were written by the same person. But the breakthrough in the Tommy Chen case came when investigators examined the security footage from the apartment complex where Michael lived. 3 years earlier, the technology hadn't been sophisticated enough to provide clear images, but enhanced analysis using modern software revealed a figure entering and leaving the building during the crucial time window. The person was wearing a baseball cap and kept their face turned away from the cameras, but their height, build, and gait were consistent with Marcus Webb. He's been doing this for years, Agent Chen told Detective Rodriguez during an emergency conference call. Tommy Chen wasn't his first victim, and Emma and Jake aren't his last. We're dealing with a serial child trafficker who has perfected his methods over multiple crimes. The investigation team immediately began searching for other similar cases across the region. What they found was a pattern of child disappearances that had been overlooked because they occurred in different jurisdictions and were separated by months or years. In each case, a child from a divorced family had vanished during a custody visit. The custodial parent had been found drugged, and a note had been left claiming the child was safe. The second confirmed case involved 5-year-old Sofia Rodriguez, who had disappeared from her grandmother's house in Pittsburgh in 2022. Sofia's grandmother, Maria Rodriguez, had been babysitting while Sofia's mother worked a double shift at the hospital. Maria had been found unconscious in her living room, having apparently consumed an entire bottle of her heart medication mixed into her evening tea. "I only drink 1 cup of tea before bed," Maria had told investigators at the time. "I've been doing the same routine for 30 years. Someone put those pills in my tea." Sofia's case had also gone cold, But the discovery of Marcus Webb's journal provided new leads. Among his writings, investigators found detailed observations about the Rodriguez family's routine, including notes about when Maria babysat Sophia and what time the little girl's mother left for work. March 15, 2022. Sophia's grandmother makes tea every night at 8 p.m. She uses the same cup, the same routine. The old woman trusts everyone in her neighborhood. It would be easy to help her sleep more deeply. The journal entries revealed that Marcus had been stalking multiple families simultaneously, studying their routines and vulnerabilities, while waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. He had been particularly drawn to families affected by divorce or separation, viewing these situations as evidence that the children needed to be rescued from unstable homes. But the most disturbing revelation came when investigators traced the fates of Tommy Chen and Sophia Rodriguez. Using the contacts found in Marcus's computer, they discovered that both children had been placed with families through the same illegal adoption network that was expecting Emma and Jake. Tommy Chen, now 9 years old, was living with a family in Nevada who believed they had legally adopted an orphaned child. The family, Robert and Linda Harrison, had paid $45,000 for what they thought was a legitimate private adoption arranged through a licensed agency. They had been told that Tommy's parents had died in a car accident and that he needed a loving home. "We had no idea," Linda Harrison sobbed when FBI agents arrived at their door to explain the situation. "Tommy has been our son for 3 years. We love him like our own child. How could we have known he was stolen from his real family?" Sophia Rodriguez had been placed with a family in Arizona under similar circumstances. The adoptive parents, James and Carol Peterson, had been trying to have children for over a decade and had been told that Sophia was the daughter of a teenage mother who couldn't care for her. They had paid $40,000 and had been raising Sophia as their own daughter for nearly 2 years. The emotional complexity of these discoveries was staggering. Tommy and Sophia had been living with families who genuinely loved them and believed they were providing homes for children who needed them. The adoptive families were victims too. Having been deceived into participating in a criminal enterprise they never would have supported knowingly. But for the biological families, the revelation that their children were alive brought a mixture of joy and anguish. Michael Chen had spent 3 years believing his son was dead, attending grief counseling and struggling with guilt over his perceived failure to protect Tommy. Sophia's mother, Isabella Rodriguez, had never stopped searching for her daughter, spending her life savings on private investigators and traveling across the country following false leads. "My baby is alive," Isabella wept when Agent Chen called to inform her of the discovery. "For 2 years I've been visiting her grave, talking to a headstone, and she's been alive this whole time." The illegal adoption network that Marcus had been working with was far more sophisticated than investigators had initially realized. Led by a woman named Patricia Vance, who operated under the guise of a legitimate adoption facilitator, the organization had been trafficking children across state lines for over a decade. Patricia Vance ran her operation from a seemingly respectable office in Denver, Colorado, complete with professional letterhead, fake licensing credentials, and a website that looked identical to those of legitimate adoption agencies. She specialized in what she called emergency placements, children who supposedly needed immediate homes due to family tragedies or abandonment. The adoptive families were carefully screened, but not for their ability to provide loving homes. Instead, Vance looked for wealthy couples who were desperate for children and willing to pay premium prices for quick private adoptions with minimal paperwork. She targeted families who had been rejected by legitimate agencies due to age, income, or other factors, offering them the children they desperately wanted in exchange for substantial fees. "She preyed on people's desperation," Agent Chen explained to the task force. "These families weren't criminals. They were victims of an elaborate fraud that exploited their desire to become parents." The network operated across multiple states, with Marcus Webb serving as one of several procurement specialists who identified and acquired children for the organization. Each specialist had their own methods and territories, but they all shared Marcus's ability to blend into communities and identify vulnerable families. Marcus's particular expertise was in targeting divorced families during custody transitions. His background in security systems gave him the technical knowledge to disable surveillance equipment, while his persona as a grieving widower provided the perfect cover for his unusual interest in other people's children. The investigation revealed that Marcus had been receiving $15,000 for each child he delivered to the network, money that he used to maintain his facade as a helpful neighbor and to fund his surveillance activities. His house was equipped with sophisticated monitoring equipment that he used to track the families he was stalking, including devices that could intercept phone calls and text messages. But perhaps the most chilling discovery was Marcus's long-term plan for expanding his operation. His journal contained detailed profiles of over 20 families in the region, complete with children's schedules, parents' work routines, and assessments of their vulnerability to his methods. He was building a catalog of potential victims, Detective Rodriguez told Sarah Mitchell during one of their regular updates. Your family wasn't randomly chosen. You were specifically targeted because of your custody situation and David's medication dependency. The revelation that Emma and Jake were part of a much larger criminal enterprise brought both hope and terror to their mother. Hope, because Tommy and Sophia had been found alive and well after years of captivity. Terror, because it meant that Marcus Webb was far more dangerous and organized than anyone had initially realized. As Sunday afternoon turned to evening, the manhunt for Marcus and the children intensified. Highway patrol units had established checkpoints at key interstate junctions, and every rest stop and gas station between Pennsylvania and Oregon was being monitored. But Marcus had proven himself to be a master of evasion, and investigators knew that he had contingency plans for avoiding capture. The breakthrough came at 7:23 p.m. when a truck driver called in a sighting of the white panel van at a rest stop near Des Moines, Iowa. The driver had noticed the van because it had been parked in the same spot for over an hour, and he had seen a man matching Marcus's description purchasing food from the vending machines. He bought a lot of snacks and drinks, the truck driver reported. More than one person would need, and he kept looking around like he was nervous about something. State police units converged on the rest stop, but Marcus and the van were gone by the time they arrived. However, security cameras had captured clear images of the vehicle and confirmed that Marcus was traveling with two children who appeared to match Emma and Jake's descriptions. The sighting provided investigators with a crucial piece of information. Marcus was still on Interstate 80, heading west toward his destination in Oregon. More importantly, the children appeared to be unharmed and were moving freely, suggesting that Marcus was keeping them compliant through deception rather than force. He's probably told them that their parents sent him to take them somewhere safe, Agent Chen theorized. Children that age would trust an adult they recognize, especially if he convinced them that their mother and father wanted them to go with him. The psychological profile of Marcus Webb that emerged from the investigation painted a picture of a man who had been completely broken by the loss of his own family and had developed a delusional belief system that justified his crimes. He genuinely believed that he was saving children from harmful situations, viewing divorce and family conflict as forms of child abuse that required intervention. His journal entries revealed a man who saw himself as a protector and savior, someone who was willing to break the law in order to serve what he perceived as a higher moral purpose. This delusion made him particularly dangerous because it meant he would never voluntarily surrender or admit that his actions were wrong. He thinks he's the hero of this story, FBI profiler Dr. Amanda Walsh explained to the task force. In his mind, he's rescuing children from neglectful parents and giving them better lives. That level of self-justification makes him unpredictable and potentially violent if he feels cornered. As night fell on Sunday, March 17th, Emma and Jake Mitchell had been missing for over 36 hours. They were somewhere on the highways of America, traveling toward a destination where they would disappear into new identities and new families, possibly forever. But the investigation had revealed the scope of Marcus Webb's crimes and provided law enforcement with the information they needed to intercept him before he could complete his mission. The race against time was entering its final phase, and everything depended on whether investigators could anticipate Marcus's next move and position themselves to stop him before he reached Oregon. The lives of two innocent children hung in the balance, along with the sanity of a mother who had already endured more than any parent should ever have to face. But the discovery of Marcus's criminal network had also provided hope. Tommy Chen and Sophia Rodriguez were alive and would soon be reunited with their biological families. The illegal adoption ring was being dismantled, and other children who had been trafficked through the system would be identified and returned to their real families. The question now was whether Emma and Jake Mitchell would join the list of children who had been saved, or whether they would become the victims who got away, lost forever in a system designed to make children disappear without a trace. The final confrontation between law enforcement and Marcus Webb came at 11:47 p.m. on Sunday, March 17th, at an abandoned warehouse complex outside of North Platte, Nebraska. Acting on intelligence gathered from traffic cameras and cell phone tower data, a joint task force of FBI agents, Nebraska State Police, and local law enforcement had positioned themselves around the facility where Marcus had apparently stopped to rest before making the final push to Oregon. The warehouse district was a sprawling collection of abandoned industrial buildings that had once served the railroad industry but had been empty for over a decade. It was the perfect place for someone trying to avoid detection, isolated, dark, and filled with hiding places where a person could disappear for hours or days without being discovered. Agent Sarah Chen led the tactical team that surrounded the building where Marcus's van had been spotted. Through thermal imaging equipment, they could see 3 heat signatures inside the structure, 1 adult and 2 smaller figures that appeared to be children. After 39 hours of terror, Emma and Jake Mitchell had finally been found, but Marcus Webb was not going to surrender quietly. "This is the FBI," Agent Chen announced through a megaphone. "Marcus Webb, we know you're inside. We want to talk to you. We know you believe you're trying to help these children, but they need to go home to their family." The response came in the form of Marcus's voice echoing through the empty warehouse, distorted by the cavernous space, but clearly audible to the officers positioned outside. "You don't understand," Marcus shouted. "These children were being destroyed by their parents' selfishness. Emma and Jake deserve a real family, people who will love them and protect them, not use them as weapons in a custody battle." Agent Chen had been trained in hostage negotiation, and she recognized the signs of someone who had completely lost touch with reality. Marcus genuinely believed that he was saving the children, which made him both more dangerous and more unpredictable than a typical kidnapper motivated by money or revenge. "Marcus, I know you lost your daughter Lily," Agent Chen called back. "I know how much that hurt you, and I understand that you want to protect other children from experiencing that kind of pain. But Emma and Jake have a mother who loves them desperately. She's been searching for them for 2 days, and she just wants them to come home safely." "Their mother is selfish," Marcus replied, his voice cracking with emotion. "She was going to take them away from their father completely. She was going to destroy their relationship with David, just like Lily's parents destroyed each other with their fighting. I won't let that happen to these innocent children." Inside the warehouse, Emma and Jake Mitchell were huddled together in a makeshift sleeping area that Marcus had created using blankets and camping equipment. For the past 39 hours, they had been living in a nightmare that they couldn't fully comprehend, told by a man they had trusted that their parents had sent him to take them to a better place where they would be safe and happy. Emma, at 8 years old, was beginning to understand that something was terribly wrong. Marcus's explanations about why they couldn't call their mother, why they had to hide in dark buildings, and why they were traveling so far from home didn't make sense. She had been trying to comfort her younger brother, while secretly planning how they might escape if the opportunity arose. Jake, at 6 years old, was confused and frightened, but still trusted that the adults in his life would eventually make everything okay. He missed his mother desperately and couldn't understand why she hadn't come to get them yet. Marcus had told him that Sarah was sick and couldn't take care of them anymore, but Jake knew his mother would never abandon them. "I want to go home," Jake whispered to his sister as they listened to the voices outside the warehouse. "I want Mommy." "I know," Emma whispered back, holding her brother close. "We're going to go home soon, I promise." The negotiation between Agent Chen and Marcus continued for over an hour, with Marcus becoming increasingly agitated as he realized that his carefully planned operation had been discovered and dismantled. The revelation that Tommy Chen and Sofia Rodriguez had been found and returned to their families seemed to break something inside him. "You're destroying everything," Marcus screamed. "Those children were happy. They had real families who loved them. Now you're going to tear them away from the only stability they've known and throw them back into the chaos that damaged them in the first place." "Marcus, those children belong with their biological families," Agent Chen replied firmly. "Tommy's father has been grieving for 3 years, believing his son was dead. Sophia's mother never stopped looking for her daughter. These families deserve to be reunited." "You don't understand what real love is," Marcus shouted back. "Real love means protecting children from harm, even when that harm comes from their own parents. I gave those children better lives." It was at this moment that Marcus made a decision that would seal his fate. Rather than continue the negotiation, he decided to make one final attempt to complete his mission. Using his knowledge of the warehouse layout, he began moving toward a rear exit where he had hidden a second vehicle, planning to escape with Emma and Jake and continue his journey to Oregon. But the FBI tactical team had anticipated this possibility. As Marcus emerged from the rear of the building, carrying a sleeping bag that contained the children's belongings, he found himself surrounded by armed agents with their weapons drawn. "Stop right there, Marcus," Agent Chen commanded. "It's over. Let the children go." For a moment, Marcus stood frozen in the glare of the tactical lights, his face a mask of confusion and desperation. In that instant, he seemed to realize that his delusion had finally collided with reality, and that there was no way to continue his mission of saving children from their families. "They need me," Marcus said quietly, his voice barely audible over the sound of police radios and helicopter rotors. "Without me, they'll go back to being hurt by people who are supposed to love them. The only person hurting these children is you," Agent Chen replied. "Emma and Jake want to go home to their mother. They've been asking for her for 2 days." It was this statement that finally broke through Marcus's delusion. For the first time since his daughter's death 5 years earlier, he seemed to see his actions clearly. The children he thought he was saving had been crying for their mother. The families he thought he was protecting them from were the same families that loved them and wanted them back. Marcus Webb collapsed to his knees in the gravel parking lot of the abandoned warehouse, finally understanding the magnitude of what he had done. As FBI agents moved in to arrest him, Emma and Jake Mitchell emerged from the building, running toward the lights and the voices of the people who had come to take them home. "Mommy!" Emma screamed as she saw Sarah Mitchell running toward them across the parking lot. "Mommy, we're here." The reunion between Sarah and her children was captured by news cameras and would later be broadcast around the world, becoming an iconic image of a mother's love triumphing over evil. Sarah dropped to her knees and gathered both children in her arms, sobbing with relief and joy as she held them for the first time in nearly 2 days. "My babies," Sarah whispered over and over again. "My beautiful, brave babies. Mommy's here. You're safe now. You're safe." Jake clung to his mother with the desperate intensity of a child who had been terrified that he might never see her again. "The man said you were sick," he sobbed. "He said you couldn't take care of us anymore." "I'm not sick, sweetheart," Sarah replied, stroking his hair. "I'm perfectly fine, and I will always take care of you. Always." Emma, even in her relief at being reunited with her mother, was already showing signs of the trauma she had endured. "Mom, I was so scared," she said. "I tried to take care of Jake, but I didn't know what was happening. Why did Marcus take us away from Daddy's house?" "Because he was sick, honey," Sarah explained gently. "Marcus was very sick in his mind, and he thought he was helping you, but he was wrong. What he did was very bad, and he's going to go to jail so he can never hurt any other children." The immediate aftermath of the rescue was a whirlwind of medical examinations, police interviews, and media attention. Emma and Jake were taken to a local hospital for evaluation, where doctors confirmed that they had not been physically harmed during their ordeal. However, the psychological impact of their kidnapping would require months of therapy and careful attention from their family and medical professionals. David Mitchell, who had been released from the hospital earlier that day, arrived in Nebraska within hours of the rescue. The reunion between father and children was emotional and complex, as David struggled with guilt over his role in making the kidnapping possible. "I'm so sorry," David told Emma and Jake as he held them in the hospital room. "I should have protected you better. I should have known that something was wrong with Marcus." "It's not your fault, Daddy," Emma replied, with the wisdom of a child who had been forced to grow up too quickly. "Marcus fooled everyone. Even the police said he was very good at pretending to be nice." The arrest of Marcus Webb led to the dismantling of the entire illegal adoption network that had been operating across multiple states. Patricia Vance and 12 other members of the organization were arrested in coordinated raids, and the investigation revealed that they had trafficked over 40 children during their decade of operation. The legal proceedings that followed were complex and emotionally devastating for all involved. The adoptive families who had unknowingly purchased stolen children faced the heartbreaking reality that they would have to give up children they had raised and loved as their own. Many of these families had formed genuine bonds with the children and were devastated to learn that their adoptions were based on lies and criminal activity. Tommy Chen's reunion with his father Michael was particularly poignant, as the 9-year-old boy had no memory of his biological family and had to be gently reintroduced to the father who had never stopped loving him. The Harrison family, who had raised Tommy for 3 years, agreed to maintain contact and help with the transition, recognizing that their love for the boy meant wanting what was best for him, even if it meant letting him go. Sofia Rodriguez's return to her mother, Isabella, was equally emotional, as the 7-year-old girl had been told that her mother had died and was shocked to discover that she was alive and had been searching for her. The Peterson family, who had been raising Sofia, also agreed to help with the transition, understanding that their role as her parents had been based on a lie, but that their love for her was real. The community of Millbrook was forever changed by the revelation that one of their most trusted neighbors had been a predator who had been stalking their children for years. The sense of safety and trust that had defined the small town was shattered, replaced by a new awareness of the dangers that could hide behind friendly faces and helpful gestures. Marcus Webb was ultimately sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole on charges, including kidnapping, child trafficking, and conspiracy. During his sentencing hearing, he showed no remorse for his actions, continuing to insist that he had been trying to save children from harmful family situations. "I regret that I was caught before I could help more children," Marcus said during his final statement to the court. "But I don't regret trying to give Emma, Jake, Tommy, and Sofia better lives than the ones they were living." The judge's response was swift and uncompromising. "Mr. Webb, you have destroyed families, traumatized children, and caused immeasurable pain to dozens of people. Your delusion that you are helping these children does not excuse the magnitude of your crimes. You will spend the rest of your life in prison, where you will never again have the opportunity to harm another child." For the Mitchell family, the rescue of Emma and Jake marked the beginning of a long journey toward healing and recovery. The children would require extensive therapy to process their trauma, and the family would need to rebuild their sense of safety and trust. But they were together, they were alive, and they had survived an ordeal that could have ended in unimaginable tragedy. The case of the Mitchell kidnapping became a landmark in law enforcement's understanding of child trafficking networks and led to significant changes in how missing children cases are investigated. The cooperation between multiple agencies and the use of advanced technology to track Marcus Webb became a model for future investigations. But perhaps most importantly, the case demonstrated the power of a mother's love and determination to overcome even the most carefully planned criminal enterprise. Sarah Mitchell's refusal to give up hope, combined with the dedication of law enforcement officers who understood that every minute counted, had brought her children home safely and exposed a criminal network that had been operating in the shadows for years. The nightmare was over, but the healing was just beginning. 3 months after that terrifying weekend in March, Sarah Mitchell sits in her living room, watching Emma and Jake play with their toys, and she realizes that healing isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about learning to live with it and finding strength in survival. The afternoon sunlight streams through the windows of their new home, a modest house in a different neighborhood, where they can start fresh while still remaining close to the community that supported them through their darkest hours. Emma is teaching Jake how to tie his shoes, a simple moment of normalcy that represents so much more than a basic childhood skill. It's a symbol of how life continues, how children adapt and grow even after experiencing trauma, and how the bonds between siblings can be strengthened by shared adversity. Jake's laughter fills the room as he struggles with the laces, and for a moment, Sarah can almost forget the nightmare they endured. But the healing process hasn't been easy. Emma still has nightmares sometimes, waking up in the middle of the night calling for her mother and needing reassurance that she's safe. Jake has developed a fear of strangers and becomes anxious when Sarah leaves him with babysitters, even people he's known for years. The family attends therapy sessions twice a week, working with specialists who understand childhood trauma and can help them process their experiences in healthy ways. David Mitchell has also been on a journey of recovery and redemption. The kidnapping forced him to confront not just his gambling addiction, but also his role in creating the vulnerabilities that Marcus Webb exploited. He has maintained his sobriety, found a new job with better hours, and has been working to rebuild trust with his children and ex-wife. The custody arrangement has been modified to include supervised visits, while David continues his recovery, but the family is slowly healing together. "I failed to protect them once," David told Sarah during one of their co-parenting meetings. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure that never happens again." The case of Marcus Webb and the illegal adoption network he worked for has had far-reaching consequences beyond the Mitchell family. Tommy Chen and Sofia Rodriguez have been successfully reunited with their biological families, though the transition has been challenging for everyone involved. The adoptive families who unknowingly participated in the trafficking ring have shown remarkable grace and compassion, helping to facilitate the reunions and maintaining relationships with the children they raised. The investigation led to the rescue of 15 additional children who had been trafficked through the network, and new legislation has been passed to strengthen oversight of private adoption agencies and improve coordination between law enforcement agencies in missing children cases. Detective Maria Rodriguez, who led the investigation, has been promoted to head the county's new Child Protection Task Force, a specialized unit dedicated to preventing and investigating crimes against children. She keeps a photo of Emma and Jake's reunion with their mother on her desk as a reminder of why her work matters. Every child deserves to go home safely, Rodriguez often tells new officers joining her unit. Every family deserves the chance to heal and rebuild. That's what we're fighting for. The story of the Mitchell family's ordeal serves as both a cautionary tale and an inspiration. It reminds us that evil can hide behind the most innocent facades, that the people we trust most can sometimes be the ones who pose the greatest danger to our children. But it also demonstrates the incredible power of love, determination, and community support in overcoming even the most horrific circumstances. For parents watching this story, the message is clear. Trust your instincts, know the people who have access to your children, and never underestimate the importance of staying vigilant about your family's safety. The world can be a dangerous place, but it's also filled with people who will fight tirelessly to protect the innocent and bring justice to those who would harm them. Emma and Jake Mitchell are living proof that even in our darkest moments, hope survives. Their story reminds us that families can be broken but not destroyed, that children are resilient beyond our imagination, and that love truly is stronger than evil. If this story has moved you, share it with other parents in your community. Awareness and vigilance are our best defenses against predators who would harm our children. Together, we can create a world where every child is safe, every family is protected, and every story like this one ends with a reunion instead of a tragedy. The Mitchell family's nightmare is over, but their message of hope and resilience will continue to inspire others for years to come. Sometimes the most powerful victories are simply the ones that bring our children safely home. Thank you for watching this story of survival, justice, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Please like this video if it impacted you, subscribe for more true crime stories, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember, awareness saves lives, and every child deserves to come home safely.